There's only one thing we can say with certainty. If we do nothing, things will get worse. They're not going to be stable. It's not like if you do nothing, it'll be stagnant. It's not as if you do nothing, it'll be status quo. If you do nothing, you can say with certainty, things will get worse.
Salamat everyone. You are listening to Red Inverted Triangle. This show is about the ongoing struggle for liberation in Palestine, produced on the unceded lands of the Gadigal people. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Like Palestine, Australia is a ground zero of a genocide that has been occurring for over 200 years and continues to this day. From the river to the sea, this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. My name is Ahmed. I am a Palestinian living on this stolen land, and I'll be your host. This podcast aims to provide the Palestinian story, the Palestinian narrative. It's necessary because we live in a heavily indoctrinated society where, as Palestinians, being able to speak, to tell our stories and narrate is the ultimate form of resistance. That's right. Resistance, hence the name of our show, Red Inverted Triangle. Each week, we'll be bringing you different segments, such as news updates from Palestine, Palestinian music, interviews with Palestinian figures or non-Palestinian figures talking about Palestine, and everything else related to Palestine. Thanks for tuning in, and long live the resistance. This episode of Red Inverted Triangle, I am welcoming back Professor Norman Finkelstein. For those who don't know Norman or have been living under a rock for the past 30 years or so, Norman is an American political scientist and activist. His primary fields of research are the politics of the Holocaust and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He wrote many books about the topic and recently conducted many interviews on the current situation in Palestine and in the Middle East in general. I had the pleasure of speaking to Norman once again last week, where we discussed the recent legal proceedings of the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. I hope you'll find my conversation with Norman useful and productive. Enjoy. Professor Norman, thank you very much for joining me today. Pleasure to have you.
I'll decide on that question when the interview is over.
Okay, so just to introduce us to this conversation, in May 2024, the prosecutor of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, submitted applications for arrest warrants against Netanyahu, Gallant, the late chairman of the Hamas political bureau, Yahya Sinwar, Ismail Haniyeh, and the commander of Al-Qassam brigades, Hamad Deif. Karim Khan since was subject to legal investigations regarding possible, sexual harassment of some sort. Recently, 5 months later, those arrest warrants were issued. Just going back to the history of the ICC as well, in December 2019, the ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda also issued a statement on the situation in Palestine, saying that war crimes have been or are being committed in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. In a recent article in The Guardian, Fatou Bensouda said she and her family were subject to direct threats while working on the most sensitive cases. Although Bensouda did not make this link, the Guardian investigation revealed how an Israeli spy chief allegedly threatened her in an attempt to prevent an investigation into war crimes and crimes against humanity in the occupied Palestinian territories committed by the State of Israel. So, just going back to Karim Khan's recent proceedings, I can't help but I'm going to throw a few questions here, and I'll leave you to expand on them. Why did it take 5 months to issue those arrest warrants? There's a genocide unfolding and intensifying by the day in front of our eyes. Couldn't Karim Khan see that?
Let's start with the ICC. The ICC is a joke. Well, let's just get clear with the nomenclature for the audience. There is the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. and that is the legal arm of the United Nations. And it's considered the authoritative legal body in the world. That's the ICJ. And then we have the ICC, the International Criminal Court. The ICJ goes back a long way, the International Court of Justice. It was a continuation of forgot the name now, but the League of Nations had a legal body also. And the International Court of Justice was a continuation after World War II, when the United Nations was created, of the legal body of the League of Nations. So it has a long history. And you could say, at least in its present incarnation, I would say it's a respectable body. Jurists of real stature have been appointed to it. There used to be automatically, the 5 members of the Security Council had automatic representation on it. This past 2 years, for the first time, because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Russian representative was not appointed on the ICJ. It has 15 members. The ICC is a very recent contrivance. It's established in 1998.
2002.
2002. I was close. I think some people dated from 1998, but others may date from 2000.
I would have thought it was earlier than that.
No. It's a very recent body, the ICC. And it's chief. Well, the lead officer in the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is called the chief prosecutor. And its chief prosecutors have been real lowlives. There was Luis something Ocampo. I can't remember his middle name. Luis, he was, I think, from Colombia, if my memory is right. He was followed by Fatou Bensouda, and then Fatou Bensouda was followed by Karim Khan. So it's only had 3 chief prosecutors in its whole history. And it only prosecuted African leaders. It became such a running joke that it came to be called ICC, International Caucasian Court, because it only prosecuted African leaders. And then they tried to, they started to play the game of identity politics, and they chose an African woman to be the chief prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda. And she continued, but now she pretended as if she was only prosecuting African leaders because as an African, she was concerned about African leaders. And one of the cases that came before her was the case of the Mavi Marmara. Now, most of your listeners will not even know about that case. So what happens is, in 2010, a humanitarian flotilla goes to Gaza to bring its supplies. This is after Operation Cast Lead in 2008-9.
And to break the siege, basically.
Yeah, to break the siege of Gaza. And on May 31st, 2010, Israeli commandos attacked the flotilla. The flagship was the Mavi Marmara, attacked it, and killed 10 passengers aboard the Mavi Marmara. Now, the boat was owned by the state of the Comoros, Comoros. And the Comoros brought a case against Israel to the ICC when Fatou Bensouda was the chief prosecutor. And then began what I think is properly characterized as a civil war within the ICC, because Fatou Bensouda was doing everything in her power to kill the case. So she kept saying, case closed, case closed. And then units within the ICC protested, and the case was appealed. The appeal was held up once. The appeal was held up twice. The appeal was held up 3 times. Because what Fatou Bensouda was doing in terms of denaturing and falsifying the documentary record was so outrageous, so off the wall, that the appeals in what's called the PTC, pre-trial chamber. The appeals were held up by the PTC. And to tell you the truth, I don't even know how the case ever ended, because the appeals kept coming, and I assume it just died at a certain point, the whole case. I wrote an entire book on the subject. It was just on this case. It's called I Accuse Herewith a Proof Beyond Reasonable Doubt that ICC Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda whitewashed Israel. That's the subtitle. So now, there were always, or I should say, beginning in 2015, a second case was opened in the ICC. The first case, as I said, was brought by the Comoros because they owned the Mavi Marmara. It was the property of the Comoros. The second case was brought by this newly born entity called the State of Palestine. And the United Nations General Assembly granted the State of Palestine representation at the UN and acknowledged that it was a state. Why do I mention that? Because the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is a state-based institution. That is to say, only states can bring complaints to the ICC. And so Palestine had to establish a legal claim to be a state. It established that claim in 2015, and immediately as it established its claim, it then brought a complaint to the ICC that Israel was in breach of international law. And the two main items in its complaint were, number one, the settlements that Israel was building in the West Bank, which under the Rome Statute of the ICC, those settlements constitute war crimes. And number two, it brought before the ICC the complaint on the basis of the crimes that Israel committed in Gaza during Operation Protective Edge, July through August 2014, because they were allowed to retroactively make a complaint for a year. So they got their claim to state, they were acknowledged to be a state, or the fancy word is their accession, ACCESSION. Their accession to the ICC was in 2015, and then their complaint was retroactive 1 year to Operation Protective Edge. And now, here's the bottom line. As you can guess, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure it out. This complaint has been lingering for 10 years in the ICC. Nothing was done about it. It was going, I have a whole shelf here of just all the litigation about this complaint, because the question kept coming up whether the ICC had the jurisdiction, which meant whether the ICC was correct in stating that Palestine was a state. There was all this debate about what is a state, and did Palestine constitute a state under international law, or did Palestine constitute a state according to the statutes of the ICC? And this went on and on and on and on. It never ended. I gave up. I stopped writing about it because it just seemed totally pointless. And then after October 7th, Karim Khan finally acted on the basis of not the original complaints, the settlements and the Operation Protective Edge. He acted on the basis of the crimes that Israel was committing after October 7th in Gaza. Well, the only reason he acted is because the pressure, the ICC was becoming a laughing joke.
When it comes to Palestine.
Yeah, well, if you don't act in Palestine, then what are you doing? The ICJ, the International Court of Justice, the legal arm of the United Nations, had already ruled that Israel was plausibly committing genocide in Gaza. Why aren't you doing anything? So he had to finally act, or the whole institution would have been completely discredited. But he's a complete sack of shit. I mean, he is such a slime ball. He gives slime balls a bad name. You know, if you look at his indictment, if you look at his arrest warrants, okay, he charges Israel with war crimes, the crime against humanity of extermination, and sundry other things. Because he's such a cowardly sack of shit, he charges Hamas with the identical crimes as Israel, as if there's any comparison in order of magnitude, but then he throws in the sexual violence.
Exactly. I wanted to ask you this question. I mean, I've got this sentence in it's very irritating. I want to read it, if I may, Norman. It says, "My office submits there are reasonable grounds to believe that hostages taken from Israel have been kept in inhumane conditions and that some have been subject to sexual violence, including rape, while being held in captivity." So this is just a small statement there. I mean, what evidence does he have at this stage?
Well, there are a number of things to say. Number one, a comparable claim was not made against Israel, although the evidence is overwhelming, not least as a result of Israeli videos that were posted on the web, that Israel is engaged in massive sexual violence, including rape, against Palestinian detainees. There's not even a dispute about that anymore. In fact, senior officials in Israel said that it was okay to rape Palestinians being detained in Israel. They approved of it. So, why wasn't that included in the indictment against Israel, the sexual violence? Number two, the claim against Hamas of sexual violence on October 7th. There's no evidence of it. I have gone through the record very carefully. I have investigated it. If it were true, it's true. You know, horrendous things happened on October 7th. There's no question about that. There was crimes of a very high magnitude. You cannot dismiss 815 civilian deaths. It's not possible. You can make all sorts of mitigating arguments. Well, Israelis killed some of them, in the crossfire, and all sorts of attempts. It wasn't Hamas. It was riffraff and ruffians from Gaza. You can try all these attempts to minimize what happened October 7th, but the bottom line is crimes of a significant magnitude occurred. You can't get around that, and you shouldn't try to get around it. You have to deal with the facts as they are, not pretend that they are as you wish them to be. That having been said, there are clearly claims that were made by Israel for which there's no factual basis. The beheading of the babies, zero factual basis. The claim of rape on October 7th, no factual basis. It's a very striking fact when you go through the record, and I've gone through the record. If you take the case of the Pramila Patten investigative mission to Gaza, Pramila Patten was appointed by Secretary General Gutierrez to investigate the claim of sexual violence. Now, she concludes that there was rape and there was mass rape and blah, 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 blah. But then there was the question of the evidence. What's your evidence? She acknowledges there is no forensic evidence of rape. She acknowledges there's no digital evidence of rape. She said that we looked at 50 hours of digital evidence. That included CCTV, it included dash cam, it included the body cams of militants, and it included the iPhone digital photographic evidence. She said we looked at 50 hours of digital evidence, which is no small amount. It's 2 hours of digital evidence for every hour of October 7th. That's not a small amount. And she said we looked at 5,000 photographs. 5,000 photographs. And she said there is no digital or photographic evidence of sexual violence. That's what she said. So it does make you wonder how it came to pass that according to Pramila Patten and the State of Israel, at places like the Nova Music Festival, where the largest number of civilian killings occurred, at places like the Nova Music Festival, they said there was gang rape at the parking area. There was gang rape in an open field. How could there be no digital evidence? How could there be no
Apaches and the drones were flying ahead?
Well, they didn't mention that evidence. They referred to CCTV, dash cam, body cam, and iPhone. Because at that point, there were no Apaches. Remember, it's at the very beginning. It's October 7th, and Israel took a long time to respond. But it is odd that they say there are between 15 and 37 eyewitnesses. That's what they say. 15 and 37 eyewitnesses. Not one thought to take out his or her iPhone and document it. If you look at, for example, the report that came out a couple of days ago by Lee Mordechai on genocide in Gaza. Are you familiar with that report?
No, not really. No.
Yeah, it just came out. And he cites dozens of video evidence of the crimes that Israelis themselves took in Gaza. You know, the Israelis were photographing when they were blowing up buildings, when they were running over, trucks were running over Palestine. They were photographing everything, right? And according to the UN report, the Commission of Inquiry report, another article, I won't go into the names. They said these witnesses, they were hiding, okay, as they were watching these mass rapes. And you didn't take one picture, not one picture. Nobody thought to document it. So that's, in my opinion, there's no evidence. I'll just say it. The UN Commission of Inquiry and Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch put out a very big report on October 7th, 250 pages. Mostly garbage, in my opinion, but that's a separate issue. And both of them said they could not confirm that rape occurred on October 7th. Now, as to the hostages, I should also say Pramila Patten pointed out that not one alleged survivor came forward to talk to them, to her mission, not one. That's very strange. You know why that's strange? Because they say, because the women were traumatized and they're so afraid. Well, really, that's a little odd. First of all, Israel is a very sexually libertine country. So, as you know, in our modern culture, women are not particularly shy about claiming rape. It's not the taboo it once was. Many women come forward and claim rape when rape didn't happen.
Especially in this context, like you have this huge allegations in the Western media. If it did happen, then they will feel obliged for national reasons.
Agree.
Nationalistic.
Totally agree. But there's another side. Gaza is a very sexually puritanical society, and women's virtue and purity are a high premium is attached to it. If you read, for example, the UN Commission of Inquiry report, the women were very straightforward about being sexually molested by the Israeli soldiers. They weren't afraid to speak. They weren't traumatized. So why did the women in Gaza freely speak about the sexual violence that they experienced, but suddenly the Israeli women become so fragile and so fearful that not one came forward to speak to the Patton mission. Now, as of now, one woman from October 7th stepped forward. They said a woman did step forward, but they couldn't confirm or deny her testimony. They had no basis for making a judgment. Now, there is one woman from a released hostage that claims she was raped. All I could say is her story keeps changing. It keeps mutating. And in her last interview that she gave a speech. Among other things she said was she was glad that Israel was starving the population of Gaza. Yeah, she said that. She was glad that they were starving the population of Gaza. Let's just say I would not classify her as a reliable witness. But the odd thing is that Karim Khan, he leveled that charge against Hamas and he didn't level it against Israel.
Yes, and he made that statement with almost complete confidence that this actually occurred, even with the lack of evidence. So I want to talk more about the ICC because I am pretty frustrated, to say the least, that it took 5 months for him to actually, or for the ICC to act on the applications. But as you say now, I mean, things have been in this process for years and years and years when it came to Operation Protective Edge.
It's been 10 years. And I think the ICC now is just acting because of the ICJ. Because of the International Court of Justice ruled that Israel is plausibly committing genocide. And because a case is now, and because it's now being litigated in the ICJ, it'll probably take, I'm sorry to report, it'll take about 2 years, I'm told, before the ICJ makes a decision as to whether Israel is guilty of genocide. South Africa submitted a 750-page, what's called memorial, basically its case, with 4,000 pages of a supplement of the evidence, 4,000 pages of evidence. Just to get through that, it's going to take a while.
Yeah, it will take a lot of time. I mean, but even the ICJ...
My point was only that so long as it's a live case in the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, the ICC has to do something. Otherwise, it looks completely ridiculous. So I think that's the only reason. I'm sure he's coming under a lot of internal pressure, like, what the hell are you waiting for? Why aren't you doing anything? So he finally had to act.
I mean, a genocide is unfolding in front of our eyes. I mean, can we say that international law doesn't work anymore? I mean,
no, I don't think that statement is correct because of the last word you used, anymore. It's never worked. It's always victor's justice, or the justice of the powerful. However, it's a powerful weapon for us. For us to now be able to say there are warrants for the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu and Gallant, the defense minister, for committing war crimes in Gaza. If we're able to say that the ICJ has said that Israel is plausibly committing genocide in Gaza, these are powerful weapons in the struggle to win over public opinion. In the court of public opinion, the fact that we can brandish these weapons, they're very valuable. But if you're expecting ultimately justice to prevail, well, that's just never going to happen. You already know the answer to that. You know how you know? You know it because South Africa went before the ICJ 4 times: January, February, March, and May. Okay? Each time it asked the court to indicate, that's the word they use, indicate provisional measures. That is to say, what we call in the United States, I don't know what you call it in Australia, we call it a restraining order, which means, let's say, you have a man who's credibly accused of battering his wife. Then the man is removed from even before the matter has been resolved in court. The man is removed from the premises and he's ordered to keep his distance from his spouse. He's not been convicted, but there's enough evidence that he may have committed the crime, that it warrants what we call in the U.S. a restraining order, okay? And the ICJ has the equivalent. It's called to indicate provisional measures. And basically what that means in the case of Gaza, the South Africa asked the court to tell Israel, one, to refrain from committing war crimes in Gaza, and two, to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. Okay? January, February, March, May, the ICJ indicates provisional measures. It does. In February, it just reiterated the provisional measures in January. But in January, March, May, they indicated significant provisional measures. For example, in May, they said to Israel, you cannot launch the offensive in Gaza. On Rafah, right? Nothing happened. Israel just went its merry way. So we already know what's going to come. Even if the court finds Israel guilty of the crime of crimes, as it's called, genocide, even if Israel is found guilty, so long as the U.S. blocks any action, nothing will come of it. But as I said, there are two ways to look at it. If you're looking for justice to be done, you're wasting your time. But if you believe that convicting Israel of the crime of genocide is a powerful weapon in the battle for public opinion, then I do think it's important to invest in that. And it's a good thing that the ICC issued the arrest warrants. It's a good thing, for sure. But don't look for justice to be done. The justice has to be done by us. The courts could provide weapons in the struggle, but the struggle is ours, because nothing will come from the courts.
That was my next question, but I do want to get your views. Just briefly, Norman, I really fear that similar things to what happened in Syria will happen in the West Bank. Namely, temporary ceasefire. We've been hearing that there's prospect ceasefire in Gaza. I fear that a temporary ceasefire in Gaza with Hamas will lead up into a full annexation or invasion in the West Bank, destruction of resistance, under the supervision of the PA. I mean, the head of the Shin Bet, he met with King Abdullah, just talking about the Syrian situation and how it might leak into Jordan and so on. Are you worried that something similar will happen in the West Bank? Things are really intensifying in the West Bank at the moment. If there's a truce deal happened with Hamas in Gaza, Hamas is kind of bound by it, can't do anything about it in the West Bank, and they just exploit that the way they did in Syria with Hezbollah.
One thing you can say about Prime Minister Netanyahu, he knows how to extract the maximum, politically the maximum from a given moment. When he sees there's an opportunity, he goes for the maximum. And now there's an opportunity. There is the combination of the distraction of Syria and the overall destruction of what was called the axis of resistance. And between those two opportunities, and Netanyahu never passes up an opportunity, it's their view, it's a possibility to make a clean slate of the whole struggle. Gaza is gone. West Bank might be emptied out, and maybe Iran.
Next in line is Iran, probably through Iraq. Things are getting a bit more and more complicated by the day. We thought the genocide is the ultimatum, but
the dominoes are dropping.
The genocide is now fading into the background, unfortunately, with what's happening.
That's correct.
But I echo what you just said. It's up to us. We need to keep fighting using those weapons provided us, legal weapons.
There's only one thing we can say with certainty. If we do nothing, things will get worse. They're not going to be stable. It's not like if you do nothing, it'll be stagnant. It's not as if you do nothing, it'll be status quo. If you do nothing, you can say with certainty, things will get worse.
That's absolutely right. If we do nothing, things will get worse. And this ever-expanding Zionist settler colonial regime will continue to devour more and more of the Palestinian and Arab land, destroying the lives and livelihood of millions of Palestinians in the process. 14 months on, and the genocide in Gaza is only intensifying. 14 months on, and the killing and destruction in the West Bank is also getting worse by the day. I know you might feel tired and uninspired to go on and keep fighting for Palestine. I know the road ahead looks very dark and gloomy, but when we look back at the road behind us, in spite of the darkness, the devastation and suffering, one thing stands out and should inspire us all to continue. That we are still here. We are still fighting. Don't ever lose hope and keep fighting, knowing that we will inevitably succeed. I'll now leave you with this song for an Australian group called The Herd, H-E-R-D, featuring Serene, Mo and Big Rigs. The name of the song is Soul of My Soul. It was dedicated for the Palestinian 3-year-old girl, Reem Nabhan, who was killed in Gaza in November 2023. In her farewell, her grandfather was holding her small, fragile body as he kissed her angelic face and eyes goodbye. Videos of Reem and her grandfather Khaled went viral on the social media. Her grandfather Khaled was killed last week in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza. He's finally now reunited with Reem, soul of my soul. Nothing will bring back Reem and Khaled, but their memory will live on, and their story will reverberate in every one of us for centuries to come. Nothing will bring them back but one dream that they both once had, and that is a free Palestine from the river to the sea. And rest assured, one day, not so far away, this dream will come true. Soul of my soul.
You are the soul of my soul. It's the removal of the mess. Cleanliness, words they use to sanitize, words they use for genocide, the world's already dead inside. Whatever the IOF said, stenographers in the press said, the moral case for massacres, aided and abetted by yes men. Won't stop until the job is done and war comes it, they mopping up. How much blood you gotta shed from children till you got enough? I have seen so many things that I cannot forget. Holocaust is weaponized and we gave Palestine the debt. Trying to gaslight the world, paint the bully as the victim, but it's streaming to our phones. Are you surprised that we don't listen? And I have seen so many parents holding lifeless kids in their arms. Are we supposed to be indifferent and calm? You are the soul of my soul. I kept your hand, so I hold you close. You are the soul of my soul. I kiss your eyes, you say will never forget. Family roots 47, near an 80-year debt. Bitch, you living in my house and it's time to pay the rent. Call this shit what it is, cause genocide ain't death. Persecution, murder, I ain't seen him dead yet. The martyr's so blessed in paradise, they ascend. Ah yes, but I've seen 1,000 kids who's bled. Man, I've seen 1,000 moms giving birth without meds. Amputations, operations, and kids with no arms or legs. Now they're claiming liberation, river to seas a death threat. Nah, please, witness the colonizer cowards playing victims, and everybody wishing that baby would breathe less. Land back now, sick of being stateless. Not complex car, evil what we up against. Simon's at the pressure, long live the intifada. Vive la resistance, vive la intifada.
protecting the oppressed. Now it's a death wish, televising the real shit. داخلين على بلادنا ماخذين نص املاكنا بتقتلوا بولادنا الهيك وعدنا كتابنا ولك اي ديانة بتقولك قتل على ارض مشكلك. No kids in Palestine don't grow up cause you raised a killer. Machine guns threatened by rock throwers who resist the villains. Netanyahu displacing millions in the name of religion. So tell me, how are you quick to call us terrorists? Someone calling exorcists, it's Palestinian excellence. Yes, we have the evidence.
Yes, we have the evidence.
نحن أولاد غزة ولا تستقوا على أولادنا. But we're taking it back now, taking it back now. It's free Palestine from the river to the sea.
You are the soul of my soul.
هذه روح الروح. الله روح وين طارق؟
You've been listening to The Palestinian Show, Red Inverted Triangle. If you'd like to learn more about Palestine, or if you'd like to get involved in the Palestine Solidarity Movement, please follow Palestine Justice Movement Sydney on Instagram or Facebook. And keep tuning in to Red Inverted Triangle. My name is Ahmed. I will see you next time.